This video is for business leaders who recognize the value and contribution of grit and creativity and ongoing education to maximize your long-term success. Have you ever struggled with sticking to your exercise program? How about eating a healthier diet? Or even starting or finishing necessary tasks that you hate doing? Even more so, how about finishing necessary tasks that you love doing but have trouble finishing? If so, this video will give you research-backed tools to get, grow, and gather grit for yourself and your team. So watch to the end of this video for bonus material from my 40 plus years of personal success starting, sticking, and getting second chances in sustaining an extremely challenging fitness program and continuing on my pursuit of my lifelong dream, which I have not yet realized. And also a recommended video about why creativity is an essential ingredient for growing your grit. So I have to be honest, the reason I'm good at grit is because I'm still stumbling toward it. Not only have I got a lot of practice, essentially one of the things I can honestly say I'm an expert at, it's not quitting, and that is definitively what grit is, but it's also because I'm still not there. I'm there in some things, I'm not there in my lifelong dream, and I've been pursuing that literally for decades because it's rather a challenge, and sometimes the chance elements, and yes, there is luck in success, not just hard work, don't happen. And you either have a choice of quitting or continuing. And that is definitively what grit is about. So I essentially have decades of failure and falling off the wagon and even flaking out or quitting. And that has really informed what has become my extensive experience. And much of my personal experience years or decades later has been verified by research by famous researchers. But I already knew it because I found out the hard way, and I hope to help you not need to. And in particular, what I found is what has worked not only for me in the real world, but what I know will work for you in the real world, because I've lived it rather than just done research on it. So unless you know me very well, I wouldn't expect you to take my word for it, especially if you're a scientific skeptic like myself. So you probably want scientifically validated evidence, and that's mainly what this video is going to be about. Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, is a wonderful place to find it, and this is sort of a flyover book review of that book, but also how these things that we're talking about, and grit in particular, and creativity merge together, and why one needs the other. So we're just going to go chapter by chapter. So you've probably heard the saying that half of success is showing up, or what is it, Aristotle? Well begun is half done. While I think that is probably not really the case, it's probably not true. I think saying well begun is half done, or half of success is showing up, is about half true. But without that initial required step, that is starting and getting going, nothing else matters. So everything else becomes irrelevant if you don't do the beginning, the start. So chapter 2 is called Distracted by Talented. And unfortunately, it's a sad state of affairs that even today in a scientific society, we are still distracted by talent. And it's interesting how she talks about how even and there seems to be some evolutionary defaults to that sort of oversimplified version, because really what it is it's the misconception that distracts us from what we all have access to, unlike innate talent, which we're supposedly just born with, and that is that both success and grit are grown. And she makes a really important point that I've been saying myself for years, including the statement that if kids or toddlers had the same frame of reference, the same mindset about learning and getting good at things as adults, our whole society would still be crawling. That is that grit and talent are grown, and most of us are so far beneath our own potential that worrying about our innate potential for most of us will probably never become a problem in our lifetime unless we're already world class, but we've been spending years or decades getting better and better through things like deliberate practice. Even so, most of those people at the top of their game still think and still feel and still behave that they've got a long ways to go, which is why they're the best in the world. So chapter 3 was called Effort Counts Twice. And there's a wonderful equation that comes out of this. It's easy. There's no real math involved. And that is talent plus effort equals skill. So your innate aptitude plus effort equals the product. The product becomes the skill, or the sum becomes the skill. And that skill plus effort equals success. So the effort is multiplied twice. Talent plus effort, then effort plus skill. So you get skill, effort twice, skill once, and talent once. So I like that sort of semantic equation that she uses in the book. So chapter 4 is how gritty are you? And I'm going to mostly skip this, other than to say self-reported scales of grit, like self-reported scales of anything, are not that valid, because you can just lie and give the answers you know are desirable. But she says something beautiful in this chapter that defines grit the way she means it, and means it in her research, is that grit is about holding the same top-level goal for an extremely long time. And an extremely long time isn't hours, weeks, or months. It's years and decades. Chapter 5 is Grit Grows, the 4 traits for growing grit. And she describes these as interest, practice, purpose, and hope. So the next chapters go into some detail on them, so I'll describe them further from there. And that is, first of all, chapter 6 is interest. So the essence of this chapter is very simple. Science backs the famous saying, and my favorite saying, from Joseph Campbell, and that is, follow your bliss. This book describes and supports with evidence and reference the fact that what you are interested in is a fundamental and foundational and necessary component of having the grit to stick with it. You have to love it, or you'll probably never persevere long enough to become good at it. Chapter 7 is about practice, and mostly, in particular, deliberate practice. The 10,000 hours and the 10 years, which is the average. If you pretend or believe you can do it far faster than that, I'd like to see it, because the evidence I've seen, not only on the scientifically valid stuff, but people claiming to get awesome at something in 30 days, I've seen their results. They're not really awesome. They just suck 30 days less. That is, they are better, undeniably, but they are nowhere near what we would call mastery. And just so you know, K. Anders Ericsson, in his book Peak, the inventor of the 10,000 hour rule and deliberate practice, specifically notes that Malcolm Gladwell got it completely wrong. Not only is 10,000 hours that average, but 10,000 hours is the average of the beginning of mastery, not the end or some special arrival point, which is an antithetical mindset to reaching mastery. So chapter 8 is 3 recommendations based on research that she cites in this chapter, and those researchers and their recommendations from said researchers are: reflect on what you're already doing to make a positive contribution to society. Remember, this is purpose. What about what you're doing matters for its own sake beyond serving yourself, but serving others, your family, society, and so forth? So think about that. Reflecting is super powerful. I do a lot of videos on that kind of thing. The next one would be Amy Resnitsky, and she talks about changing your work in small but meaningful ways that can change, that can enhance its connection to your core values. And this is interesting work for a lot of reasons, not only because this and the previous one I just mentioned are both definitely something that involves your creativity, right? The creativity of grit, the creativity component that's necessary to build your grit and stay gritty, but also that Adam Grant, the famous Wharton professor, is associated with her work where they're doing that. And she calls this idea of taking your job or taking your vocation and tweaking it to be more meaningful and aligned with your core values, job crafting. So this isn't to pretend that every job is going to be a great, meaningful job. It's to do within the autonomy that you have that which will make your work more meaningful by tweaking it to align as far as you possibly can, to align with your values so that you're more passionate about doing it, so it keeps you gritty. And the last one is a researcher named Bill Damon, who recommends finding inspiration in a purposeful role model. Two of my immediately purposeful role models are Leonardo da Vinci. He's probably the most timeless genius ever in history, in my opinion, and Elon Musk. And whether you love him or hate him, he has done things that align far more with a purpose for doing humanity good than doing himself good, such as giving away the plans to his batteries, which he could have made millions or billions of additional dollars on, but he gave away the intellectual property. That says something beyond, I just want money. I just love it that he's also making more money than anybody else. So it kind of worked out for him. So the next one is chapter 9, and that is hope. So for this one, I'm going to talk about an old friend of mine who I actually haven't talked to in decades. Now, he was a Kung Fu teacher, as well as a father and many other things, and somebody very interested also in success like I am. Excuse me. And it was, my voice is going to die. I had to drink. If you're not unconscious or dead, you still have hope. Now, he was talking about in the context of literally a physical confrontation, an actual fight. It's like, well, you can still win. You can still save yourself and your loved ones. As long as you're not unconscious and dead, you still have hope. But that sort of hardcore level is something to think about. Unless there's quite literally no way you can change your behavior or continue acting in the direction of your dream, of your passion, of anything like that, you still have hope. That's a super powerful frame and mindset that most of us, including myself, are guilty of forgetting in the time we need it most. So, chapter 10, I love what she said. She said, love, limits, and latitude. And this is respect to the last few chapters we've talked about was growing grit from the inside, as she called it. Now we're talking about growing grit from the outside. That is, who and in what circumstances, in what environments can you grow grit? Who should you seek? Who should you associate with to help you grow grit from the outside? And she refers to love, limits, and latitude with respect to parenting, something that she calls psychologically wise parenting. And this is a direct quote from her in the book, and that is, parenting that includes demanding standards and support is the clear winner for producing gritty kids. That is unconditional love and support, but still demanding with high standards or demanding standards. That is the combination that research backs as being the way to derive gritty, successful kids. Now, she goes on to extend that. The next chapter is called The Playing Fields of Grit, and it's mostly talking about sports team and extracurricular activities, mostly in high school and college age students. But it's essentially saying, though, and research supports all of this, that those students or young people who take place in extracurricular activities with adult supervision in a circumstance where we as parents, and I'm not a parent, but those who are parents might find it really difficult not to praise everything your kids do, whether it actually was worthy of that praise or not. Your people who are coaches, ballet teachers, and other kinds of mentors like that will praise you for doing real work and for keep high standards, but also support you, or at least a good one is. And that's what she's talking about. How I loved it because she talked about her own sort of shortcoming in terms of overpraising her own daughters, and that this is one way she can outsource a certain amount of those high standards, which she also has for her kids. But that somebody who is not the parent is probably more capable of being specifically good at expecting those high standards while still being supportive, but not so emotionally invested or biased, such as a parent would be. Okay, and the next one is that building, and this is another quote from the book, grit building activities should be both interesting and challenging. And what that is she said these extracurricular activities, anything that they do, should be selected or chosen by the person, the student, the employee who will be engaged in that. So you give them the choice. They've made the choice, but it should also be challenging. They should have the autonomy to choose what they're interested in, and it should be challenging. So interesting, but also of their interest, not imposed on them, and challenging. The next one was chapter 12, and this was called A Culture of Grit. And this is the essence of my classroom when I'm teaching, my consulting, when I'm doing it. In a sense, and this is from Ricardo Montalban many years ago, it's a bit of a benevolent dictatorship. That is, this is all about helping you. And this goes to those same standards I was already talking about. This isn't all about your choice. It is your choice, but it is a high standard and also incredibly supportive. And that is the way I run my classroom. And at the same time, this is what they're talking about professional sports teams and other cultures, other organizations, including very successful corporations who use this, have been very successful with it. And here's another quote, and that is, there's a hard way and an easy way essentially there's a hard way and there's an easy way to get grit. The hard way is doing it yourself. The easy way is doing it with a group who has a gritty culture. So I'd add to this that in particular, that's the case if you have a gritty teacher or a gritty coach specifically, rather than just being surrounded by grit and high standards, which is awesome. By having somebody who can actually instruct you how to grow that grit effectively with their high standards, but also how to achieve better, more effectively deliberate practice. One of the fundamental components of deliberate practice is actually having an expert coach is ideal, or expert teacher is ideal. Second to that would be having immediately objective, accurate feedback to help you identify the weak areas of which you need to improve, which is another part of the essence of deliberate practice. Now, chapter 13 is just conclusion. So it just summarizes and encapsulates all that I've talked about. And so that's it for the summary of the book review. And now we're on to the bonus material. And this is from my 40 plus years of doing fitness and exercise. I have sometimes taken years off, but at 55, I have been exercising most years, most weeks, and most months for 40 years now. So I will call myself an expert, an uber gritty person when it comes to sticking to fitness. I do not love doing exercise. My exercise is always designed to be high intensity and extremely hard, and it has never really been fun or fascinating. This is usually weightlifting, and now it's some kettlebell exercises I've invented for myself, but it's always been really, really challenging. How have I been able to do this? First of all, I seek challenge. I have built up my grit and my perseverance and my self-discipline to this, but mainly it is because I focus on the feeling after. I feel damn good about having exercised rather than exercising, because I'm not doing like recreational sports. This is purely for fitness sake. But also I have fallen off the wagon, quit, been distracted, had other commitments that made it impossible in some cases. But I always come back to it, taking full responsibility that I chose not to do it or had no choice. And in either case, I exercise complete and ceaseless self-compassion. It's like, okay, it's done. You can't change the past. Get back on the damn wagon and do it again. So basically a combination of doing it because you know it's the right thing, developing the grit through practice and habit, being ceaselessly self-compassionate about when you fall off the wagon, and starting again immediately. And then the other one is, for me, I'm still doing it. I'm still doing that stumbling towards it because I haven't realized my lifelong dream of being a full-time inventor, doing my sustainable inventions and having them impact the world in a significant way, which I believe they can. And I think it was Jim Rohn, but this is my favorite saying about grit or perseverance. I will climb this mountain or die upon it. And I mean that to the depth of my soul, that I will continue striving to reach my lifelong dream. And I will either die of old age trying, or I will achieve it before I die. Those are the only alternatives that I give myself. And that's the kind of thing. If you really want something, are you willing to do it until you either die of old age, still trying, or achieve it? If you are, it's still not guaranteed you can succeed. I haven't yet at 55, but it sure as hell increases the odds radically. So just a couple little points, and that is, please share this video with anyone who could benefit themselves or others by watching it. And finally, my recommended video is about why creativity is an essential ingredient of growing grit. And that's been actually sort of the background motivation here. All of the things we've talked about and finding ways to apply these gritty principles is finding a creative relationship or bridge between what you need to do that's gritty and ways to do it that work specifically for you, of which I've shared my own. And I'll put the link to the video there. It's called Make Work Personally Meaningful. And I will also put it in the description. This has been Crush It Club 250. 250 videos in 250 days. That's some grit demo there. How creativity, the creativity of grit. I renamed it. That's it. My name is Tim B. Green. Bye for now.